Two.
The two types of tape that you can use to seam this together are a fiberglass mesh tape or paper roll. Now, the fiberglass mesh tape is the one that probably most amateurs, do-it-yourselfers will prefer. It actually comes with a self-adhesive stickiness to the back, and what I like is you can just put it right on there, and you can just use your putty knife to cut the tape. So we'll do that on 2 of the 4 seams. Alright, and so make sure your tape overlaps the seam that we're going to be patching up. Now the paper one, you're not so lucky to have the self-adhesive stuff on it. So we're going to have to put down a little bit of joint compound first and then the tape. So let's take a second to talk about the joint compound. When it comes to buying your joint compound, make sure you read each product carefully. Now these 2 products look similar, but this one here is actually made for your very first step, which would be what we're doing: patching our seams, covering the tape, filling any kind of cracks or gaps. This product here is made for doing more the secondary, third, and final steps. It's a lot smoother. It has all the air whipped out of it, and so it goes on a lot creamier. It's easier to work with, but it's not the best thing to use for your first application of taping. Now, these are already pre-mixed for you, so you can just open the lid and go right to town with it. They also make joint compound. Ooh, where's Van Dorf now? Aha! They make this joint compound that you have to mix. It's a powder, and it's a little bit trickier if you've never used it before. You can either get it too watery or too thick, and then you just kind of wasted a lot of time. So I would probably suggest one of these two. However, these take a while to dry. These will take anywhere from 8 to 24 hours to dry before you could go to your next and third coat. This product, though, actually has numbers on it, and this particular one says 20. And what the 20 represents is minutes in typically how fast it's supposed to dry. You can get them as long as 90 minutes or more. You can get them as short as 3 minutes. I wouldn't try doing like a whole basement or something with using 3-minute stuff. We're ready now to put on our tape. Well, it's actually the paper, but you know what I mean. Okay, so as I stated before, we first have to put our joint compound on. And we went over the joint compound, so I have some mixed up here in a little pan. Now, a good friend of mine told me that when you buy a putty knife, if you look at it right down the line, there's a slight curve to them, and that curve is made so it helps feather the edges when you put on your joint compound. So, with that in mind, I have my blade going the proper way, and I put just a little bit of joint compound on where I'm going to put the tape. Now, where we had the fiberglass mesh tape, that doesn't matter. You can completely cover that right now. This is why a lot of people prefer the fiberglass mesh, because it saves you a step. Now I'm going to put on the paper. And what I like to do first is I have a little bucket of water, and I like to dip my tape in the water before I put it on there. It's important that you have that enough plaster or joint compound behind the tape when you first put it on. Otherwise, the tape will probably bubble on you, and then you have to go back and do repairs. Once again, another reason why people prefer the fiberglass tape. Okay, so I got the plaster or the joint compound underneath the paper, and then you have to put another layer on top of it again. Don't worry too much about trying to put all the plaster on in one coat, and it doesn't have to be super smooth at this point, but you don't want to put it on real thick, because after all, you don't want to spend all your free time trying to sand off too much. So it's better to go with thin layers, and once it dries, you can lightly feather the edges and put a second coat on, and then trying to put it on all at once. Another little tip you can do is you can use a damp sponge, and I usually don't do this at the first coat, but this will give you an idea. And I just lightly feather the edges of the. See, I'm not going in the middle. I'm just going right out on the edges, and I'm just lightly feathering those out. So once again, there'll be less sanding when we're done. Well, here we are. Got our first coat on. First coat's dry. Now, if you did your job properly and didn't put it on too thick, nice and thin, then I don't do any sanding at this point. I'll merely just take my putty knife and I go around it, maybe knock off a few little high spots under there, and I'm going to proceed with the second coat. 2. Same thing as the first. This time though, when you put your second coat on, go a little bit wider than what your first coat was. That'll help you feather out the edges, and it'll be less noticeable where you patched. Another thing too is, like I said, you can wet your putty knife. You can get this wet when you want an extra smooth, and the lower you keep your putty knife to the work instead of out like this will give you a smoother finish. And then, as always, I'll take a damp sponge, go around my edges, and feather that out. I feel like Bob Ross here in The Joy of Painting. Oh, I see a little tree living up in here, and maybe we have some birds. The drywall patch is just about dry, so normally it takes me about 3 coats to do this, but it looks good enough. I think I got lucky on 2. So at this point, this is where we're going to do our sanding. Now I can feel just a little bit of edge around where my plaster is coming to the drywall off the patch. So I'll take a sanding block or sanding paper, and around the edges just do light circles, and then I'll kind of hit the middle of the field of the patch there and take out any bumps or imperfections as well. I will. Final step, the real test to see how you did with the drywall patch. Close your eyes and see if you can feel any bumps. None. I like it. And that is probably where I'm going to call it for the day. Wow. Just make sure you open your eyes after you're done feeling for that. Ooh. I tell you, that looks so good. It brings me to my favorite part of the day. I like to dance. Oh my. I pity the fool.